Hello there, everyone. This is Mr. D doing this video for the Holy Chronicles put out by me, Mr. D, using the Holy Bible, God's Word. And we are now at chapter 31. If you haven't marked my subscribe button, please do so at this time. And so you get notified when the next one comes. I decided to do this one without any pictures in the back because this is a pretty simple one. This has to do with Jacob getting ready to move on to his homeland, and he's going to leave where he's been for a while, which was Leah and Rachel's father, Laban, I think it was. Let me make sure that I get that right, you guys. Pretty sure it was Laban. Laban. I don't know. Laban. And let's see here how they want to say it. Oh, wrong chapter, wrong book. I screwed up. It's in Genesis. Okay, Genesis. Genesis 30 was with, well, Genesis 30, we know what that was. That was the children. The children were being born, for Jacob. But 31, Jacob, my Bible says, Jacob flees from Laban. So what does that mean? He flees from Laban. He's his father-in-law, I guess, and his wives. Why would he want to flee from Laban? Well, it says it right here in chapter 31. Why he left the way he did. Or did he? Maybe he didn't. Maybe we'll find out. So here we go. Chapter 31. Oh, and my rock's in the back. Don't mind the dog. He may be an illusion, but he really doesn't listen to me. So just kind of ignore him when he goes by. Okay. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything out our father owns and has gained all of this wealth from belonging to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. He's getting a little concerned because, Laban was kind of really not too honest with him with what he did with his daughters and making Jacob work for all those years. He shouldn't have had to work all these years. I had a phone call. I guess I'll have to call them back. But you know what? Laban's children are starting to, they're starting to grumble because they don't understand what Laban, their father, did with the deal he made with Jacob. It was a fair deal, but he didn't keep his word. So let's go back to number 31. And let's put my phone, we all have these phones, and they just seem to ring when you don't want them to ring. So I'm going to say, I'm busy. I'm busy with what? I'm busy with God. We should always look at life that way. We should look at life as an opportunity to share what Jesus has given to us with others. Sometimes it's very hard because anger can come from someone being dishonest. Like this story we're reading about someone dishonest. When I read this chapter this morning on the freeway, again, I probably the fourth or fifth time, all of a sudden I found myself like with this streak of anger. How could someone be like that when someone has been so kind to them for so many years and put up with them? It just don't understand it. And this world is full of it. I mean, as you go around, people just don't have any courtesy and love and respect. They do if they're taking a picture, but as you run into them without the camera, you see the real side. So let's get back to this chapter 31, okay, where it says, then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So he knows that God's going with him. So he has the protection of God. And that's the one thing that Laban, I don't believe, had. He might have had the grace or favorism that Jacob had brought upon him because of his prayers towards Laban, but it surely couldn't be from the way he treated him. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out of the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. Amen. God of his father has been with him. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, and then all the flock gave birth to speckled young, and he said, the streaked ones will be your wages. Then the flocks were streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given it to me. Didn't matter what Laban did. God was there, and God's in control. And when God's in control, wait and see what happens. I do that. I'm retired. I was removed from a job that I was doing for God unjustly, and I leave that up to God to rectify that. But in the meantime, going through each of the chapters of God's word opens my eyes to the more glory of God. It makes me question why he does something, but he has a reason for everything he does. And if we keep following that blessing that's driven in our hearts to be with him, we'll eventually see what God's doing for us. So we continue now. 14. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Those are some devoted wives. They stand behind the man, but they stand behind God, even though they don't quite understand, because remember, basically the book talks about, Jacob, Abraham, all these males, and that how God blessed them and their children. Well, Jacob is above them and takes care of them. So I believe that God is there with them. And these women said, do what God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban and Armian by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. He was scared, but I don't understand why, with all the things that God done for him and things that are happening as God professed, why he gets scared. But our human nature is where we're not sure, we get kind of panicked. I know I do. And I try to make sure that God is part of everything that I do. And I have for several years now, probably more so last 10 years, thanks to a bunch of children, of course, at my substitute classes. The children changed my heart with God. God's used the children to change my heart. God uses children to change our hearts. Our hearts need to be like the children. And that's what teaching did for me. And if it hadn't done that, I may not be here right now going through all of these chapters. You know, there's like 939 chapters just alone in the Old Testament, not counting the New Testament, just the Old Testament. A lot. Oh, you know, but God has something for all of us, just like he has something going on here. So it says here on verse 22, on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled, taking his relatives with him. He pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. And God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything. And you would hear that word, anything, to Jacob, either good or bad. That was a pretty straightforward comment. Well, we go into now 25, and Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him. And I'm like, Laban or let's put Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then, maybe it's Laban. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You've deceived me. And that's where I started laughing in the car. I could not believe this guy could say this, that Jacob deceived Laban. Oh, come on. Laban was about as deceitful as there was. What have I done? You've deceived me. You've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly to deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy, singing to the music and timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, be careful. He's not listening, you know. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob after either good or bad. Well, you know, he's blabbing his mouth right now. Now you have gone off because you've longed to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? That was a legitimate question. Why did Jacob steal the gods? Or was it? You remember? Remember a little bit back when Rebecca took those gods? Rebecca, his daughter. Is he going to forsake his daughter when he finds those gods? Is God going to allow them to find the gods? I think God even sometimes protects things that are not right, you know, like a God, bronze, gold, whatever, to worship when he is the God. He makes that clear in his Ten Commandments. And here, you know, our founding fathers in the Jewish faith, which was Jacob, which he gets called another name later on in another chapter, but Jacob, and he's supposed to be the foundation block. And here his wives are with gods, but that's immaterial, by the way. The question is, what's God going to do about this? Because you know, unfortunately, they're probably going to. So Jacob had pitched his tent, and we move on down. And he says that God told him not to say anything good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. So why did you steal my gods? 31. Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid. I thought
You would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has our God, that person shall not live.
So see, I had thought at first Jacob was aware of it.
Like when he asked him, "Why'd you take my gods?" He said, "I was afraid."
That gives me an idea that he was doing it because he was afraid. But it's not. He tells them to search his place. And whoever has a God should not live. In the presence to our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. Now, Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Oh, now Rachel had taken the household gods, she's thinking, household gods, and put them inside her camel's saddle. That was thinking. Sometimes women have really, really, really good ideas way beyond ours. That was a good idea. Put it in her saddle. Or was it God that inspired her? Those are things we need to look at. Inspire her, one, to protect her husband, and two, to bring it more her direction because it's in her saddle, in the camel saddle, I think. And it says here, Leah tent and into the tent. Wait, no, it says here, and now Jacob, God, so they've been went to live. Yeah. And it said, and they found nothing in Rachel's and Leah's and the girls. And Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So he searched but could not find the household gods. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have you wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched for all the goods, and have you found that belongs to your household, put it here in front of the relatives and mine, and let them judge before the two of us." Well, he didn't have anything. "I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep, your goats have not miscarried. Now, nor have I eaten ram from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demand payment from me for whatever was stolen by the day or night." This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night. The sleep fled from my eyes. It was like, this is the 20 years I was your household. I worked for you for 14 years for your two daughters, 6 years for the flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. This guy was a really bad dude. I mean, I don't care what anybody else, me reading this section and comparing it to what he did was not good. It was very me. That's my terminology, by the way. Me, human, sin, lust of this world. No Jesus. Me. And most of the faith in our world, people still have lots of me in them. They don't have Jesus. They have me. They know Jesus. They say they love Jesus. They say they want to be with Jesus, but they still live as me. Very prejudiced, negative, slanderous. This is just our world. The last days, the days before Jesus comes back. So, back to this so called comment. Let's see. I'm at verse. I went through the consuming. It says, yeah, on verse 41, it was like, this was 20 years. I was yours, your household. I worked for your 14 years for your two daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And you charged my wages 10 times. It's God of my father, the God of Abraham,
and the fear of Isaac had been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But yeah, if they had not, I think I misread it. If he didn't have them behind him, he would have surely went empty-handed. Well, God was still, I think, been there. I don't know which way we're going, but God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands. And the last night, Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what I can do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have born. Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let's it serve as a witness towards us. That was verse 44. Unfortunately, I guess the me and me would be too angry at what this guy did to my life for 20 years. Kind of have the same situation with a member of my family. It's hard when someone's very negatively sneaky around you and you do everything you can for that person for years. And they just take you. It's a hard thing to cope with. So he's put in a situation that he has to make a covenant with this guy, a covenant of probably peace. So let's see what it says here. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Okay. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahadatha. Jacob called it Galid. That was verse 45. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Galed. It was also called Mespah because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughter, or if you take any wives besides my daughter, even though no one is with us, remember that God is the witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have to set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar was a witness that will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap to pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their fathers judge between us. Laban has a lot of nerve, by the way. God's in control here. He thinks he's playing a game, trying to justify what he's doing by putting this marker. Jacob already knows that God is in charge. The marker is something between them. I don't understand why God allows it, but God has a reason, and he allows Jacob to do these things. And me, I'm not quite sure why. Remember, I told you I'm not a pastor. Unfortunately, my years of life, 70 some years of life, I didn't get the opportunity to be a pastor. Sometimes I wish I had. Sometimes I'm glad I'm not. But I do know one thing, that God now in my life is number one. And that's where we need to go. And unfortunately, I don't understand why they're making a peace offering between them by putting the rocks up there. I'm sure something's going to come up between this guy because he is just not kosher. Okay. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country, invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren, his daughters, and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. End of 31. Sometimes I get a little emotional over these different chapters, and maybe we need to relate them to our life. And people that do certain things in the Old Testament reflect what we see happening in our life today. I think these stories help us to have a better idea how we should deal with those type of relatives, those friends, people in our lives. But I will see where God takes me. Again, this was chapter 31, and we're getting ready to go into 32. So Mr. D is going to tell you, you have a wonderful, blissful day, and I will see you soon on chapter 32. God bless. Take care, Mr. D.